Imagine the chilling unthinkable. The one you trusted most transforms into your deadliest threat. A quiet knock, a familiar face, and then an avalanche of horror that obliterates a family, leaving an entire community scarred forever. This is the story of a lone survivor against a man consumed by bloodlust, who emerged from the darkness. "I've been shot. I believe I'm shot." A whisper of terror. "Are you calling me?" asks the dispatcher. "What is your name?" And then, a name that echoes through the silence: Cassidy Stay. What unspeakable darkness drives someone to annihilate an entire family, parents, children, all of them, in the sanctuary of their own home? July 9th, 2014. A seemingly ordinary summer day in the tranquil suburbs of Spring, Texas. The sun blazed, kids were home, families nestled in their safe, tree-lined havens. But this idyllic calm was about to shatter. Police were summoned to a scene of unimaginable horror on Leaflet Lane. Inside a modest brick house, 6 lives had been brutally extinguished. 2 adults, 4 children, all executed in cold blood. Only one person clung to life, a fragile testament to the atrocity. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing was stolen, no forced entry, no immediate motive, no suspect fleeing. Just one haunting question. The Stay family had no known enemies. So who could have done this? Let's rewind to that fateful July afternoon, to the front door of the Stay family's home. A man appears, cloaked in the guise of a FedEx delivery worker. Clipboard in hand, uniform convincing, calm demeanor, nothing to alarm, just a routine delivery. The girl who answers, Cassidy Stay, recognizes a face but can't quite place it. He asks for her parents. She tells him they're not home. He leaves, but he returns. This time, the charade crumbles. No more FedEx. He reveals his true identity: Ronald Lee Haskell, her ex-uncle, her mother's sister's former husband. The moment she tries to shut the door, a terrifying spiral begins. Haskell forces his way in. The quiet safety of a suburban home is replaced by raw, primal panic. He overpowers Cassidy, ties her, forces her face down, and he waits. It gets worse. One by one, the rest of the family returns. Stephen and Katie Stay, and their 4 children, each ambushed, bound, forced to the ground alongside Cassidy. No chance to fight, no time to run. They didn't know it then, but Haskell wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to threaten. He was there for blood. When they couldn't give him the answers he craved, where was his ex-wife? Why had she left him? He didn't hesitate. With cold, calculated cruelty, Haskell shot each of them in the back of the head, execution style. He fired at the entire family, one after the other, 13 shots in total. He tried to erase them, and yet he failed. Because Cassidy, despite a bullet tearing through her skull, severing a fingertip, didn't die. Miraculously, she clung to consciousness. And then, she did something extraordinary. She played dead. Perfectly. Haskell, believing his monstrous deed complete, fled in the family's car, confident he'd silenced every witness. But Cassidy got up, bloodied, broken. Through sheer unwavering will, she managed to call 911, and through a haze of pain and terror, she told the police everything: who the killer was, what he looked like, and most crucially, where he was heading next. Because Haskell hadn't come to Spring just to kill the Stays. He planned to finish what he started, to hunt down more of his ex-wife's relatives. Thanks to Cassidy, the police moved with lightning speed. They intercepted Haskell, driving towards another family member's home. What followed was a heart-pounding 20-minute car chase through suburban streets. Sirens screamed. Finally, spike strips disabled his vehicle, trapping him in a cul-de-sac. But he wasn't done. He held a pistol to his head, initiating a tense, hours-long standoff. Negotiators worked tirelessly to de-escalate, and at last, he surrendered. As he was taken into custody, the full, horrifying weight of his actions began to sink in. A man so consumed by anger, so blinded by vengeance, he tried to annihilate an entire family. But even in that profound darkness, a single light shone. Cassidy, a teenager who refused to die, who outsmarted a killer, and who ensured justice had a chance to catch up. Now, let's honor the Stay family, the beautiful lives stolen in the most heartbreaking way imaginable. This wasn't just a headline about 6 victims. These were real people. Stephen, 39, a loving husband and father, a hard-working entrepreneur. Katie, 33, his wife, who had moved their family from California to Texas in 2012, seeking a fresh start in safe, quiet Spring. They couldn't have known the past they left behind would follow them with deadly intent. And their children. 4 beautiful souls, each with dreams, quirks, and smiles that could light up a room. Brian, 13, the oldest, kind-hearted and bright. Emily, 9, and Rebecca, 6 inseparable sisters, full of energy and curiosity. And Zachary, just 4, the baby of the family, still learning to tie his shoes and say his ABCs. They were the kind of family you'd see laughing in the grocery store, the kind who decorated their lawn for Halloween, ordinary in the most extraordinary way. And then, the miracle. The survivor, Cassidy Stay, a Klein Collins High School student, the girl who answered the door, the one who looked a killer in the eye, the one shot in the head, who lost her parents and all 4 of her siblings, and who, against all odds, found the strength to call 911 and warn the police. Cassidy wasn't just lucky, she was heroic. Because of her, more lives were saved. Because of her, the horror stopped there. The world noticed. Within days, Cassidy became a symbol of resilience. Her courage moved a nation. A GoFundMe raised over $400,000. Just 2 days after the shooting, she was released from the hospital. Her physical wounds raw, her emotional ones barely forming. But she stood tall. She spoke publicly. And in one of the most powerful moments, Cassidy quoted Albus Dumbledore. Happiness can be found even in the darkest of times if one only remembers to turn on the light. Now, let's pull back the curtain on the man behind the massacre, Ronald Lee Haskell, Jr. A name now etched in infamy. But before he became a national headline, he was just another face. A kid from San Marcos, California. Prom king, class clown. He didn't fit the mold of a future mass murderer. On the surface, he was social, likable. People remembered his humor, not his violence. But that's the insidious truth. What you see rarely tells the whole story. After high school, his path wound through states. He settled in Utah, married Melanie K. Lyon in 2002. From the outside, they were another young couple building a life, connected to the Stay family through shared faith. But behind closed doors, a different reality was unfolding. By his early 30s, the cracks in his marriage became chasms of violence. His behavior grew erratic, controlling. His relationship with Melanie became toxic. She finally left him, finalizing their divorce on Valentine's Day, 2014, just 5 months before the massacre. Melanie didn't just leave the marriage, she fled the state, relocating to Houston with the help of her sister, Cassidy Stay, a decision that would tragically cost Katie her life. Haskell spiraled. He stopped working. His life lost all direction. No job, no family, no anchor. Yet, in his twisted mind, he wasn't the problem. Everyone else was. He saw himself as a victim, blaming his ex-wife, her family, anyone who helped her escape. The rage from his wife leaving transformed into a heinous plan. He wasn't just seeking revenge. He wanted to obliterate every part of the life Melanie had rebuilt without him. And that meant destroying the people who had helped her. The Stays, a family who once welcomed him, a family who, in his mind, had become his enemies. Ronald Lee Haskell didn't snap overnight. His violence was calculated, premeditated, dressed in disguise, armed with a plan. He crossed a line he could never return from. The quiet kid with the prom crown was gone. In his place stood a man who believed his pain gave him permission to end lives. And he nearly did. To truly understand this tragedy, we must delve deeper into his past. Perhaps then, we can glimpse how the threads of a life unravel to such a heartbreaking, violent end. Back in June 2008 in Utah, Ronald Haskell was arrested. Not for a simple argument, but for a brutal incident, dragging Melanie out of bed by her hair, striking her head, all in front of their terrified children. This wasn't just domestic discord. This was violence unleashed before his own kids. Haskell tried to dismiss it, claiming only a push, but the physical and emotional scars told a different story. He faced charges for domestic violence, assault, and violence in front of children. A plea deal saw him guilty of simple assault, the more serious charges mysteriously vanishing. A legal compromise that tragically often leaves victims exposed and abusers emboldened. Fast forward to July 2013, just a year before the murders. Melanie Lyon was still desperately trying to shield herself and her children. She filed a protective order on July 8th, served the very next day. But it wouldn't last. By August, divorce papers were filed, and by October, the protective order was dropped, replaced by a mutual restraining order during custody proceedings, a legal trade-off that granted Melanie primary custody of their 4 children, while Haskell moved back to his parents in California. He was out of her life, but not out of her thoughts. She knew what he was capable of. That fear followed her, even across state line. When he showed up at the Stay family's Texas home, Haskell was still carrying a California license. This was no impulsive act. This was a deliberate journey. A man stewing for months, perhaps years, over lost control, now determined to seize it back in the most twisted, unforgivable way. The system had given him a chance to escape his past consequences. But on July 9th, the victims would pay for that leniency with their lives. Just when you think Haskell's story couldn't get more disturbing, there's another twist. Barely a week before the massacre on July 2nd, 2014, his own mother, Carla Jean Haskell, walked into the San Marcos Police Department. Her report wasn't just alarming, it was horrifying. She wanted a restraining order against her own son, a mother begging law enforcement for protection from her child. The reason? A ferocious argument that spiraled into a nightmare. Ronald had forced her into the garage, tied her wrists with duct tape, strapped her to a computer chair, holding her captive for nearly 4 hours. He threatened to kill her, and his entire family. Why? Because she dared to stay in contact with his ex-wife. That's how volatile and paranoid Haskell had become. Any perceived betrayal, even from his own mother, ignited a storm of violence. It wasn't just revenge, it was about power, control, punishing anyone in his way. Here's where it takes a grim turn. Law enforcement searched for him after Carla's report, but he had vanished. No one knew he was already on the road to Texas, plotting what would become one of the most shocking family massacres in recent U.S. history. The warning signs had flashed like neon. His own mother had sounded the alarm, but it was too late. By the time police caught up, 6 members of the Stay family were gone, and a lone survivor was left to tell the world his monstrous deeds. The wheels of justice began turning swiftly at first. On July 10, 2014, Ronald Lee Haskell was formally charged with 6 counts of capital murder. Given the brutal, calculated nature, there was no hesitation. He would face the death penalty. But Haskell's time in court would prove as unsettling as the crime itself. On July 11th, during his first appearance, something strange happened. As charges were read, Haskell began to shake uncontrollably, then collapsed. Deputies rushed to lift him. He managed to stand only to collapse again. Was it genuine shock, fear, or an act? Either way, he had to be wheeled out. The man who had coldly executed an entire family now seemed unable to even face the consequences. Over the next few months, Haskell made several appearances, but delays dragged the proceedings for years. His trial was repeatedly pushed back, finally beginning in August 2019, 5 long years after the crime. The courtroom heard the full case. On September 26th, a month later, the verdict, guilty. Not just guilty of murder, but capital murder. The jury had no doubt about his intent, his planning, and the utmost cruelty. Just 2 weeks later, on October 11th, Haskell was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Today, he sits on death row at the Allen B. Polunsky unit near Livingston, Texas. A man who tried to destroy an entire family, but failed to silence the one person strong enough to survive and speak out. Cassidy Stay. And yet, as the court battles fade into memory, the most haunting part remains. How many red flags were missed, and how a 15-year-old girl had to become the only surviving witness to one of the worst family massacres in recent U.S. history. In the quiet aftermath, the community came together to mourn. The funeral for Stephen, Katie, and their 4 beautiful children, Brian, Emily, Rebecca, and Zachary, was held at the Hare Road Chapel. A solemn gathering filled with grief, heartbreak, and prayer. Friends, neighbors, strangers gathered to pay respects, to try and make sense of the senseless. Photos of the children, smiling, full of life, stood near their caskets, a painful reminder of everything taken. Days later, another memorial at Lem Elementary School. Classmates left messages, drawings, flowers. The school community, devastated, created a space for remembrance and healing. In a world that often forgets the victims, these moments mattered. They reminded us that behind every headline are real people, real families, real futures cut short. But through the darkness, one light remained. Cassidy Stay, the only survivor. Her strength and resilience would inspire thousands, and while the world would never forget the horror of July 2014, it would also remember the bravery, the love, and the bond of a family that even death could not break. The Stay family, murdered in their own home by someone who once sat at their dinner table, someone they once called family. 6 lives wiped out in an instant. As we remember them, not just for how they died, but for how they lived, one question remains. How many more warnings will we ignore before we stop calling these tragedies unimaginable? Share your thoughts below. If you've made it this far, be sure to check out this next video. Thank you once again for watching.